Jason Wiggam, welcome back to the podcast. I think you were the very first one I posted on here, but now we have some more relevant stuff to talk about. But first of all, let me ask you this: How is you're a tax lawyer? How is business these days for y'all?
Um, for the most part, well. First of all, thanks for having me, Jim. It was fun doing this the first time, and glad to be back. It, I don't want to say it's been business as usual. I mean, we've noticed the effects of the recession like everyone else, but we're able to work remotely. We were primarily dealing with the government, over the phone. There wasn't that many in-person meetings. So we've been able to kind of continue our work, and then we've been able to help a lot of our clients, with the various programs that are out there, which I think we're going to talk about. And we've been renegotiating a lot of deals for clients. So, if, for example, so sorry, let me back up. A change in financial circumstances, grounds to, cancel your installment agreement or whatever deal had been negotiated with the government before. So we had a client that was, for example, we had a client, massage parlor. We were almost ready to agree to a $3,500 a month installment agreement. This business has a payroll tax liability of, I think like 300,000. So not a bad deal in light of the total liability, but right before we agreed, COVID came in, the crisis happened, and their income went to zero. So we were actually able to get them a new deal where they didn't have to pay anything, and that will last 2 years. So we're doing a lot of that, like, hey, where are you at right now? What's going on? Tell me, and can we, somehow make your situation better? So that's how we've stayed busy. We've been fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, I'm hearing so much as far as different sectors of small business owners that are having obviously a very tough time right now, and that's just because you said something about a massage business. I think about that. I look at any business that's in a strip mall. I think about, and then of course the cascade of what is above them, commercial landlords, and then what's above them, banks, small community banks. Maybe they're not getting repaid their loans. You asked me earlier about law firms, and in my business, and I guess to answer your question earlier, how we are doing, we're in the personal injury business. It's interesting. I think you're automatically used to, I think an ebb and flow of when revenue comes through. So I think for the ones that are lean, that don't have tons of overhead, maybe the ones that are not over leveraged, they'll probably be okay. I think, like myself, and that's good. We can do that. But I certainly think others that carry on, massive employees, I think they're gonna probably have a harder time. But I know criminal defense lawyers right now. I mean, there's number one, there's no court. So, and a lot of the stuff, their payments can be built on, okay, before this court date, we'll be expecting payments. But in your circumstances, what kind of other businesses are you seeing that are having trouble? And yeah, what other kind of businesses have you seen that this is really affecting and really impacting?
Yeah, it's a quick note on our criminal defense friends. I know I've talked to some of them and other attorneys that are pivoting into new practice areas. A lot of them, I think you're going to see a lot of bankruptcy attorneys emerge. That's something we've done. Our firm has done for a while. But I think it makes sense because they're unfortunately.
So don't go hire some guy that just started bankruptcy law. Have them call you.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, you read between the lines there well.
Sure.
But I get it. I respect what they're doing. I mean, they have to feed themselves, and you can you're faced with a bad situation and you can, crawl into a ball and do nothing, or you can respond to it and try to improve it, right? So I think that's the way to go. I mean, it doesn't mean you'll get back to where you were or anything, but you can make it better. But in terms of who we represent, I mean, we represent a solo business operator all the way up to much larger businesses and all different industries. So, I mean, I represent dentists, doctors, a lot of strip mall businesses, restaurants, you name it. So, yeah, I've been surprised. I mean, I've had dentists who, are unable to get the necessary PPE they need to reopen. So their revenues have dropped to zero, or they're only able to do like limited emergency type stuff. I've had doctors also, elective surgeries and things that they're not able to do. So, and then obviously restaurants, anything that involved getting within 6 feet of each other, massage parlors, you name it there. So, in terms of the people that, are, are doing the same that I've seen, and I haven't been talking to them as much because they don't need help, right? But I represent some law firms. Some of them, it's been they've been able to work remotely and continue cases. I represent a few estate planning elder law firms, and they've been fine. So it's been really interesting. I've seen different reactions from people too. I think my personal opinion is, the ones who have the right mindset about it, even when their situation royally sucks, those are the ones I respect and seem to be doing the best. Now, it's not that I disrespect someone that is in a bad situation and is crawled into a ball crying about it. I just don't think they're going to make their situation better in any way or help their family, when they're like that. So, and if I talk to them, I tell them that I'm not mean. It's just like, hey, can you do virtual classes? Is there something you can do to generate some kind of revenue? It's not going to be where you're at before, but it's at least something to move your business forward. I represent a Pilates franchise, and they switched to virtual classes pretty quickly, and the revenue is 10% of what it was before, but she was able to keep her coaches employed and keep her customers interested. So whenever things reopen and return to normal, I assume they'll still be there.
I had one of my last guests was Elsie Brotherton. She's the owner of Highland Yoga. They have quite a few locations here in Atlanta. And one of the main reasons I brought her on is because I think having a yoga studio that packs people in and does hot yoga at 95 degrees is probably one of the biggest gauges we have to registering when people are, when we are, back to normal, so to speak.
Sure.
So if they can survive, I think anybody can survive. And that's, I think, what was so interesting there. But, and that's kind of one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on, is because I just want to give people that are listening, that are looking for these answers, a place where they can find those answers. So let's talk real quick about solutions people can do. PPP, I think a lot of people probably think that is coming to an end, and you and me were just looking up the numbers to that. And how much is left in that, and what can people use that for?
Yeah, so the payroll protection program, which started under the CARES Act, the stimulus package, and by the way, we're talking today, May 8th. I just wanted to put that in because,
Thank you.
The information could be old by the time someone listens to it. But I think there's a little under 100 billion left in round two. So round one went quickly, and round two has lasted longer, or at least it's felt like it has.
Why is that?
I think it's because the loan amounts are smaller. Basically, every client I've had that's gone for it has gotten it so far. I have some that are still in the funding process. So I would say as of today, or I don't know how quickly this will get posted, but shortly after this, if you haven't done it yet and you qualify, you should. So what can you use the PPP loan for? So the idea is it's this loan that the government will give you if you're a quote unquote small business, and to cover your payroll for 8 weeks, and some other costs. And if you use it for those purposes, the loan can be forgiven. So it can be, quote unquote, free money. Small business is defined as 500 employees or less. So I said quote unquote because that's, in my mind, a pretty large business. Your
Let me
loan
let
is,
me let me back up real quick, if you don't mind. You said
yeah,
if you can prove that you use it for payroll, you don't have to pay it back, correct?
yes.
But if you get
Well, I mean, there's some more restrictions, but yeah, that's the idea.
so could somebody apply for this and use it for something else, and they just pay it back?
Um, yeah, I mean, theoretically,
Right.
the covered uses though. I mean, I guess you could get you certify that you're going to use it for these covered uses. So I guess there could be potential criminal liability for lying, um, committing fraud, or whatever. But the covered uses are payroll costs, which are defined pretty broadly. It's like any form of compensation, wages, bonuses, tips, you name it. Um, Retirement contributions, group healthcare costs, some taxes, state taxes, utilities, rent, and it's rent where a lease was in effect before February 15th of this year. So I read that to mean it could be various kinds of leases, and mortgage interest on a business mortgage that pre-existed February 15th. So
So
those are
you
the
so you
yeah.
can use that money on rent, leases, things like that.
You can use it on other debt too. So the act says fixed debt, but it's very explicit that if you use it for quote unquote fixed debt, it's not forgivable.
Hmm.
So I have clients that are using the funds to pay off higher interest debt.
But then they have to pay it back. They're just basically
Yeah,
they're just
then it's a
transferring
loan.
debt.
I mean, it's probably the greatest loan you would ever get in your life. A 2-year note, no personal guarantee, 1% interest, deferred for 6 months, so you don't have to make payments for 6 months. I mean, no, it's unsecured, so there's no collateral. I mean, a credit card's unsecured, and you have to make a personal guarantee, and the interest rate's probably 30%. So just comparing the two of them, it's and the due diligence is less to get this than probably a credit card too.
So just going over this again, there are many other uses other than payroll that you can still use it for and still be forgiven and not have to pay it back.
Yeah, so 75%. If you're going for forgiveness, because I think we were talking about just using it but not seeking forgiveness. If you're going for forgiveness, it's 75% must go to payroll. Individual employees can't be paid more than 100 grand. So over the and you got to spend the funds over 8 weeks, right? So 100,000 divided by 52 times 8. So each employee can't be paid more than $15,385. If they are, you could still pay them and just not forgiven. Um, Group healthcare, retirement, all of that is payroll costs. So 75% has to go to that. Then they limit it further if your headcount, if the total number of employees is decreased, or individual employee pay decreases more than 75% as compared to the first quarter. It's a little bit complicated because there's different periods and different formulas, but that's kind of the big picture of it.
This goes into the next topic I wanted to talk to you about, and that was what about resources for stuff other than payroll? And I think you just answered that question as far as the PPP loan. So I think that was really helpful, and I appreciate that. What about places? How do people, if it's not too late to get this loan, how do people go and apply for that? You told me you do this online, not through necessarily a bank, but just go online. Where do they go?
Yeah, here's what I'd recommend. I would apply at multiple places. There's no penalty for doing so. It's whoever gets your application approved first who wins. That's the best way to think of it. Whoever gets you an SBA number first gets your business. Okay. Small local banks, um, or online providers, so third party loan providers. So in it's been a moving target because some of the people that were good in round one have been bad in round two. But so far for us, small local banks, then PayPal, Blue Vine. We used Lindio a lot in round one. Round two, I haven't been as impressed. Cabbage. So PayPal has been the quickest for us recently, though. So
I'm sorry. So
and
applying through PayPal for the
it's
payroll
an online
protection program.
portal. It's quick and easy. I mean, round two for us, it's been a lot of sole proprietors, like independent contractors, so pretty small loan amounts, like 5,000 to 20 grand, and they've been great.
So much valuable information here. Um, where can somebody go to look at I guess, the ways that they can apply this money as far as rent? Get that list of rent, leases, those itemized lists.
Yeah, so the U.S. Treasury has a pretty decent website for this. That's where I would start. So it's kind of a long address. I'm not going to read it out. The way to get there is just Google U.S. Treasury PPP, and the first link that comes up is the Treasury's website. And you scroll down, and there are multiple links with information. One of them is Program Overview. And then there's a for borrowers section, and it literally says how to calculate the loan amount. There's a for more information document. If you click on it, it'll tell you what you can use the loan for, sort of like an FAQ, frequently asked question document.
Yeah.
That's where I would start. And then when you apply through these places, they are aware of these rules. So they kind of direct you through them. In terms of pitfalls, I mean, the rules have changed. I mean, I literally read the CARES Act the night it was passed. I read it when it was in the Senate too. So I've been following along from the beginning. And, I think some of the original intent has been removed, and the SBA, as they've interpreted this, has changed a lot of things. So one thing, like if you're a business that's struggling, you don't need to worry. But, if you were a business that, might not be struggling, or your prospects improve, there are some pitfalls, to be aware of. The SBA has indicated that the certification you make when you make the loan that your business is being affected due to the economic uncertainty is a higher bar than we originally thought. They're on this website, and their frequently asked questions document, it indicates that they want you to look to see if you have other sources of liquidity. Could you get a loan somewhere else? Are you profitable? So for anyone that's not struggling right now, personally, I would still do the PPP. I did it for my own law firm. It's just more restrictive than we originally thought, is all I wanted to point out.
So what do people need to keep track of to make sure that they're, able to show that this is what, I guess what those credentials force you to show? What kind of tracking do people need to keep?
So you make the certification on the date that you apply. So I think for me, you want to think about, okay, what does the future look like, and why do I need this money for the next, 2 to 3 months? And I think for all of us, it's that we don't know what the future holds. I mean, it's pretty bad now. I think the unemployment rate is like 20% or 15 to 20%. And
yeah, I think I just read around 15.5% as of today. Yeah. And the market's still jamming, still going up. I'm like,
yeah, I think there's a
no
lot
correlation.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are a lot of negative effects that haven't, worked their way through the system. So, who knows what that will do. So I think that's part of the analysis. It's like, look, I'm doing a cash flow projection. Here's best case, worst case, mid case scenario. And as long as you have that analysis that you could need the money, because that's what you're going to need to be able to show that there was some thought process behind needing the money. Like, look, if you're like a restaurant or a gym or something, I mean, you're probably losing money right now. So I wouldn't sweat this at all.
You say that, don't sweat this. And I'm like, really?
Well, because I think it's clear that the economic uncertainty is affecting them, right?
Right.
Like if your revenues have stayed the same and you're keeping all your people employed, I think you do need to sweat it, right? Because there's a question of whether you actually needed the loan. Now, this all came about because of larger companies, publicly traded companies that got the funds, and some of them literally I think it was Potbelly or Ruth Chris, like one of them had literally raised capital on the private market right before they got the funds. So they really didn't need it, you know. They had some pretty bad facts. And you know, I think there was a lot of outrage due to that. So the government responded by making it more restrictive because they wanted the, you know, masses not to be upset, even though it was underneath the act, it was perfectly legitimate for them to apply for the loans. There was an exception in the restaurant industry where you could be much larger than 500 employees. Um, you know, I just think the optics of it were bad, you know. So and so in response, the SBA has said they're going to audit every loan above 2 million. So if, like, you know, ordinary people that are getting loans less than 2 million, I think they have less to be concerned about. But the SBA has said they're going to audit those too. You know, will it be a very high percentage rate? I have no idea. You know, that's the uncertainty. So I think just going into it, knowing that the uncertainty exists and planning for it is all I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that, you know, you need to, you know, freak out or worry too much. I just, you know, I'm just trying to be honest about where we're at today.
So, Jason, we talked about the PPP loan and using it for things other than just payroll. We obviously need more resources, and I think other things are coming from the Federal Reserve down the pipe. What else is going to be available to small businesses coming soon?
Yeah, the biggest thing is this Federal Reserve Main Street lending program that I'll talk about in a second. I do want to make a quick note that there have been like state and local loan programs and grants. So the city of Atlanta had one through Invest Atlanta that's already expired. I know Fulton and DeKalb County here in Atlanta had their own separate loan programs. I've heard of like New York City having programs, you know. So I think just paying attention. I know Facebook had some grant programs to see, you know, what's out there. I don't know if any new ones will come about, but you know, those came and went. So you kind of had to be paying attention and take advantage. But the Federal Reserve Main
Real,
Street,
real quick,
yeah,
let's get into that. But I think what I'm really hearing is if you're suffering, don't suffer in silence. Reach out. Reach out to local bankers. Whether you mentioned something about Facebook, obviously, everyone's kind of very, you know, everyone's very much a community right now as far as going through this economic recession, this repeat of the Great Recession. I think it's what it's looking like. And so I think reach out to people, reach out to bankers, open up your resources. Don't just, and I think you've said it before, don't just sit back with your head in the sand, just waiting for this to go away, because it's not going to go away. Things are only going to get tougher. So reach out. There's a lot of programs, and go ahead, Federal Reserve.
Yeah, well, before I dive into that, I agree with what you just said. I mean, and, you know, if you have trusted advisors, talk to them. I mean, I literally sat on a call yesterday, 30, 45 minutes with a former client who was having difficulty applying for unemployment. She's an independent contractor, and you know, typically they were unable to get unemployment until the CARES Act allowed for it. And the process of obtaining it was difficult for her. She's not good with technology. So I literally was helping her apply online yesterday. That's not something I normally do or charge for. She was just a really good former client. We're friends, and, you know, I was willing to help her out, you know, but I'm just giving that example that if she hadn't reached out to me, I would have had no idea what she was going through, you know. So I think everyone has, you know, hopefully has trusted advisors, friends, you know, the community they can talk to get help. But Main Street lending program. So there's like 3 different programs. I'm going to talk about the Main Street New Loan Facility. That's the title. I don't know where they come up with these titles. They're all kind of crazy, but it is what it is. So this is a loan. So you have to pay it back, but it's a really good loan. Not as good as the PPP, but still pretty solid. So I'll quickly go through the terms. So it's a 4-year term. They defer payments for 1 year. So you get the money and you literally don't have to repay anything back for a year. And it's adjustable rate, but it's tied to LIBOR, which I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's a I think a rate set in London that all banks use. It's very low right now. and it will probably stay low for the foreseeable future. So it's the LIBOR rate plus three percentage points. So you're probably talking like a 3.5 to 4% loan. Okay. And how do you qualify? Well, the loan is designed for businesses that were doing well in 2019. So I think, putting myself in the Federal Reserve shoes, they wanted to give money to people that were successful before the crisis because they want to keep them afloat. And because I think they believe if they give them money, they'll be able to go out and create things and hopefully create jobs, keep people employed, make good things happen. So it is the earnings of the business for 2019, the EBITDA, the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. If that term is overwhelming, I just want you to think about your net income, whatever the net income of the business was. So revenue minus cost of goods sold minus expenses equals your net income. You multiply that number by 4. Okay, so if you made $250K in 2019, you multiply it by 4, it's $1 million. You would be eligible potentially for $1 million loan. The minimum loan they will do is $500,000. So what that means is, to qualify, you would have had to earned at least $125,000 in 2019. Now, because it's EBITDA, that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So, certain industries have a really large amount of depreciation. I'm thinking like real estate, but a lot of people buy cars, they buy equipment, these things get depreciated. You get to back that out. So depreciation makes your income decrease, which is a good thing. But here, you remove it, which will increase your income and hopefully allow you to qualify for this. But there's no prepayment penalties, and banks will be doing the loan, and there will be underwriting. It will be harder to qualify than the PPP, but for a lot of people, I think this could be a potential lifeline.
Excellent.
And by the way, you can do it if you got the PPP loan too. That's the other interesting thing.
So PPP is not a limitation there.
Correct. It does look at your current outstanding debt, and they will subtract that from what you qualify for. So, depending on when you apply, maybe the PPP reduces what you could get, but you could still, do it.
Okay. That was the first type of Main Street lending program?
Yeah, and that's the one that everyone's going to qualify for. The other two are if you already have debt, and then another one for much larger businesses. But and really at the end of the day, your banker is going to drive this, because the Federal Reserve set up this program where they will guarantee the loan for the bank, and are incentivizing banks to do this.
If people want to research these 4 Main Street lending programs that are forthcoming, what can they look up? What can they Google?
Yeah, so the Federal Reserve has a pretty good website. I just searched Federal Reserve Main Street Lending Program, and the first option that came up was their webpage. So it's federalreserve.gov/monetary policy/Main Street Lending.htm. I think they could make that shorter, but I digress. And there's a lot of information on the different programs. There's FAQ, etc. But there were no fees with the PPP. There is a fee with this. The bank can charge an origination fee, which I believe is 1%. Let me look. Yeah, it's 1%. So, but still, that's compared to a loan in the private market before all of this, that's not bad, so.
How hard are these loans going to be to qualify for?
I think it will be, it looks like they're letting the banks set some of the underwriting, so I think you could see some differentials there, but yeah, it's going to be a normal loan underwriting. They're going to look at your tax returns, where you're currently at, probably your credit score, um, a variety of things there. Um, the and it, like when you read the FAQs, the Federal Reserve says they allow for banks to do like industry specific underwriting, whatever that means. I'm assuming that, depending on, like, there's some unique business differences as to certain types of industries. So maybe there's different things they look at, but I think this will be more like a normal loan from your bank. But like right now, I don't think a normal loan from the bank they would be willing to offer, but for this, so like I said, they're looking at like if you did well in 2019. So if you didn't do well in 2019, or you don't know your numbers, it's probably not the program for you. But if you were a business owner that was on top of your numbers and knew where you were at and where you were headed, this is a good program.
And I think you gave me a really good segue. And this was meant to be sort of a quicker podcast for immediate resources people can use. But you mentioned if somebody had a really good year in 2019, they were jamming. I mean, good profit, everything was going well. Then guess what? It's March. It's time to do their annual taxes, their year-end taxes. They do that. They see the amount they owe in the middle of March, and then it's time to pay those taxes. And then they have a massive tax liability, and guess what? Now their business, the governor just shut down the state or their city, whatever it is, and they can't make any money now. So and now, of course, they got to worry about PPP, paying their employees, paying their rent, keeping the business afloat, and of course, Uncle Sam also wants their money. You wrote an article recently where there are 4 ways people could sort of get some assistance or help in for tax liabilities. And so you have a good 2019 year, you can't pay your taxes when it comes time. What do you do?
Well, so this year is unique. The tax deadline has been moved from April 15th to July 15th. So your hypothetical, I'm assuming the person, was waiting to pay their tax liability to April 15th, and now they don't have the money, right? Which that's a lot of people do that, and that's fine. So now they have 90 days, so if things improve in the next 90 days, they can pay it. They still have the ability to file an extension until October 15th. So the first thing I would say is if you're unable to pay it, still file your tax return. I see people all the time that think, well, I can't pay it, so I shouldn't file. They charge excessive penalties for not filing. So always file on time. And then, the sort of the 4 options you were talking about. And I'm just pulling up that article. So number 1, you can just delay. I mean, I think a lot of people assume because it's the federal government, they're going to take like your firstborn child. They're this big scary creditor, I deal with them every day. And while they do have a lot of powers that a normal creditor wouldn't, for the most part, they follow a system and a process to their collection. So if you understand how it works, you can take advantage of it. So, for example, they cannot seize your property until they issue a particular notice called a final notice of intent to levy. So in many instances where we have clients who can't pay their tax liability, we just do nothing, monitor their account. I guess do nothing is not fair. We're doing something. We're just monitoring their account to see where they're at in the process and has this notice been issued. And then once the notice is issued, you have 30 days to file an appeal. And after day 30, you are theoretically exposed to enforcement action. So just understanding where you are in the process and taking advantage of that can provide a lot of relief. I think where people get off track is they don't understand all of that. And, they're getting scary letters from the IRS and it's the government, so they're worried they're going to go to jail. They're worried that, bad things are going to happen to them. So, we understand when that is and when it isn't the case and can leverage that. Right now, in addition to moving the tax deadline, they announced the Internal Revenue Service announced the People First initiative. And what that is a moratorium on any kind of enforcement action, garnishment, seizures, tax liens from being filed, anything of that nature until at least July 15th. So along with extending the deadline, they've done that. They also paused installment agreements until then. So, we spent a lot of time calling all of our current and former clients who have an installment agreement to say, hey, you do not have to pay it for the next 3 months if you do not want to. So a lot of people were very happy to hear that and save the money. So yeah, you come to July 15th, you can't pay. I would extend until October 15th. And then, I'm referring to their individual tax return, right? And then I would file October 15th on the deadline and then delay as long as I possibly could. For most people, that's 6 months to a year, where they don't have to pay anything. So that is a loan. You're basically entering into a loan with the government. That's how I like to think of it. So that's option number one. Option number two, if you owe less than 100 grand, they have what are called streamlined installment agreements. These are installment agreements that are very easy to obtain and that involve terms of 6 to 7 years. If it's $50,000 or less, they will not file a tax lien. So there really is no negative effect to having the tax liability other than the penalties and interest they're going to charge you, which the interest rate is going to be 3% July 1st. So it's not that expensive. The penalties charged when you're in an installment agreement are a 0.25% per month. So that's what, for a tax attorney, I'm really, really, really terrible at math. So let's pull out my calculator. So 0.25 times 12, that's 3% a year. So it's a lot less than you would think it would be. And you enter into this installment agreement, you pay them back. If it's your first time having a tax liability, it's highly likely they would waive the penalty too. So you really just have a loan with a 3% interest rate. The interest rate is the Federal Reserve rate plus 3%. So until the Federal Reserve raises rates, which I do not see happening for a significant period of time, you're paying 3% interest. Option 3 from my article, let's say you can't afford to pay a 6 or 7 year agreement, or even if you could, maybe you don't want to. They will negotiate based upon your ability to pay them. So for a lot of people right now, you have no ability to pay because your business is not making any money, or it's just making enough for you to cover your necessary living expenses. If that is the situation, you could enter into a much lower installment agreement or enter into like this hardship status called currently not collectible, where you don't have to pay anything. But just to be really clear, they will give you an installment agreement based upon your ability to pay. So if you can prove that you can only afford to pay $100 a month and you owe $5 million, they will give you a $100 a month agreement. It's kind of wild, but that's how it works.
And then
finally, yeah.
And then in the article, you actually list a hypothetical where you're able to get a $400,000 repayment reduced to $100 a month. And of course, the longest they can come after you is for 10 years, correct?
Yeah, the long-term strategy is you first you would delay and minimize what you pay as long as possible. We aren't doing that now for some people because maybe their financial situation will be better in a year. So let's go ahead and take advantage of how bad it is now, because it's sort of the opposite of what you would think. The worse off you are, the better deal you're going to get with the IRS. So you enter into the agreement, and yeah, the hypo of it's not a hypo, it's an actual client. So they owed around 400 grand and it was $100 a month. So they will never pay that in full. I mean, $100 a month for the next
$12,000.
Yeah. Once again, terrible at math. So, and they weren't even, it's not like there was 10 years left. I mean, they were already a few years in too. So it's even less than 12. So we have a lot of taxpayers who never pay it in full, just by doing that. And now is the time to do it because you will get your best deal possible when things are bad. I have clients who, when things were bad in the last recession, they waited 2, 3, 4 years until their financial prospects improved before they hired me to try to settle with the IRS. And I was like, look, client, you're crushing it now. You don't, you qualify for a 6-year payment plan. Maybe I can get your penalties waived, but you're not going to get some pennies on the dollar settlement because you are collectible. So I get it's tough because I don't work for free, but the deal you might qualify for now could be a lot better than you would get a few years from now. So, the cost now is probably worth it, or it is worth it in my opinion. Other option was a penalty abatement request. So, they will abate penalties in certain situations. If it's the first time you've had a tax problem, that's an easy one. If it's, kind of a multi-year issue or not the first time you've had a tax problem, we have to have a good story, financial hardship, which we're all going through now, death, disability, medical issues, illness, stuff like that. Basically, needs to be a good sob story. But we're pretty good at getting those sob stories out of our clients and developing them and making them be as empathetic as possible. That's what we do. So, and then finally, there are situations where you can just outright settle. So they have a program called offer and compromise. That's where you approach the IRS and let's say hypothetically the person owes $100,000. You offer to settle for $5,000. There's a formula to determine what you qualify for, and like everything else, the worse off you are, the lower the number from the formula will be. So they look at your assets and your liabilities. The lower the value of your assets, the better. And they look at your monthly income and expenses. So, the lower your income, the better, and the higher your expenses, the better. So, a bad financial situation is a good thing for this. I feel like I end up giving people good news on the phone a lot. They're in a terrible situation. They just told me all about it. And it's like, look, prospect, I hear you. That's awful, everything that you went through. And I'm probably going to give you your first piece of good news you've heard in a while, which is we're going to be able to use every horrible thing that's happened to you to your benefit now. And then finally, bankruptcy. So offers and compromise and bankruptcy, I think about the same. They're both just a settlement. You can discharge income taxes by filing for bankruptcy. Usually if you qualify for an offer, you qualify for bankruptcy too. So it really comes down to which one gives you the better deal. Which one will you save the most money on and will make your financial situation better. For whatever reason, people always are hesitant to file bankruptcy. And, it's kind of amazing to me. It's like, hey, look, 90 days from now, all this debt can be gone and your life could be so much better. And, I feel like I end up coaching a lot of people to do it and convincing them to do it. But, just looking at the two of them, if you have a lot of non-tax debts, bankruptcy tends to be better. But it's individual to each person. There's a lot of little, twists that you have to look at. But for every client that comes in, we analyze all of these options and, present them to the client and let them decide whatever makes the most sense for them.
Yeah. So I think we said it was 4, but that really sounded like 6 ways.
Yeah, you said 4 and I rolled with
it. See, I can't count. All right. Well, good. Cool. Anything else that people need to know about this? That resources for them that are available, or just things you want people to know before they just panic, or like we said earlier, they just stick their head in the sand?
I would say a lot of my clients have had success deferring debt payments, so their mortgage, rent, credit card payments, and I've been surprised how some large financial institutions credit card companies, et cetera, have been willing to work with people, so I wouldn't, like, if you're unable to pay, and look, I get it. You're probably someone who's always paid your debts, and this is foreign to you, right? But don't be ashamed. Don't let it, get to you. Be proactive. Contact these parties and see if they're offering any kind of relief or can help you. I mean, they're not going to let you out of the payment. They're probably going to add it to the end of the term of the loan, but you at least improved your cash flow prospects for maybe 30, 60, 90 days. So I would exhaust all options. The other thing I would say, though, on the flip side of that is I do deal with a lot of people who engage in magical thinking. And so what that is when someone is facing a really, really bad situation and they continue to throw good money at bad, I see it all the time with failing businesses where they are not going to turn it around, or they do not have a plan to turn it around, and they end up wasting a lot of money. So I do think having a brutal, honest assessment of where you're at and do I have a plan to turn things around or to survive in the intervening time frame is important. Because if not, maybe it's time to pivot into something else. Like if you weren't profitable before the crisis, maybe we're not going to be profitable after, right? I think that's what I'm getting at there. I'm not trying to say that you should, if things are bad, abandon all hope. Definitely do not. I mean, hopefully you've listened to everything we talked about here and you can hear there are options for you. I just meant basically don't keep your head in the sand. You got to do something. The situation I see a lot is I have a lot of businesses who owe payroll taxes that contact me. I represent them. I love helping them. But there is no end game where you can't pay your payroll taxes. That world does not exist. I can delay, you from having to repay it for a while, but at some point in the future, the IRS is going to assign an agent to the case, and they're going to say you need to start paying these payroll taxes for each payroll run that you have, or we're going to put you out of business. And I consult number one with these clients. I tell them, what's your plan to pay payroll? Are we going to lay off people, or are we getting, maybe there's a part of your business that's unprofitable, like where are we at and what are we going to do to fix this problem? And many of them don't do anything, or, they just, their strategy is hope. That's not a strategy. They have like no plan. So that's all I was getting at there. I wasn't trying to say that everyone, doesn't, but, just, I think having a plan, very important.
I think it's time, if things aren't going well for your business and you know it. And I think I've seen a couple restaurants in my area, in my neighborhood. I think they were kind of struggling before, and this certainly, they basically said, fuck it, I'm out. I'm done. And we're certainly in a survival of the fittest time, but it just, I think, always goes back to self-awareness. If you suck at this, in 2019, then in 2020 you probably don't have a chance. So it's a good time, like you said, to pivot. I used to tell sort of the opposite. I knew some very successful realtors right now that started in 2009, and I was like, damn, if you can make that work, I mean, you could probably be okay in any market, So it was pretty impressive, but I guess now we're in sort of the antithesis of that. If you couldn't make it, 4 months ago, then certainly be aware of what you're doing. But still, regardless, you need to know your options. And if you are going to take those steps, you sort of laid it out in this over the last 45 minutes or so. So I really, really appreciate that. The name of the game here, I'm hearing, is really reach out. Don't be silent. Don't let the ship sink. There are options, and the recovery here is not just for payroll. It's for a lot of other things as well that helps keeps your doors open. So anything else you want to add?
No, I agree with that. And, I hope, I hope if anyone's listening to this and is having difficulty that, that they emerge out of it and that their prospects improve. And, I think, hopefully 6 months from now, we'll all be in a better place. If anyone wants to get in contact with me, our number is 404-233-9800. My email is jwiggam, JWIGGAM at wiggamgear.com. That's WIGGAMGEER.com. If you think I can help you, I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you. And thanks for having me on again, Jim.
Absolutely. This was certainly not meant to be the entertaining podcast that keeps people just emotionally, intellectually stimulated. This was, actual resources people can use. And that's why I called you, man. So this was absolutely awesome. Thank you for coming on. And when things do change, and there are other reasons to, get you on where you can give other resources, I want you to come back on. Is that cool?
Yeah, anytime, man. Just call me up. Happy to help.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Jason, thank you again, and we will talk soon, brother.
Okay.